This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Scientists continue to seek better weapons against malaria. Each year, the number of cases is in the hundreds of millions worldwide. About 1 million people die, most of them in Africa. Economic losses from the disease amount to an estimated 1% of the African economy each year. George Demopoulos is an associate professor at the Johns Hopkins Malaria Research Institute in Baltimore, Maryland. He says 42% of the Earth's population live in areas where malaria-transmitting mosquitoes exist. All of these people are at risk of being infected with malaria. He says the sad thing is that the majority of people who are killed by malaria are children. This is because their immune systems are not strong enough to fight the infection. Malaria is caused by a parasite called Plasmodium. The organism is injected into people through the bite of infected mosquitoes. Malaria can be treated, but in many areas, the parasites have become resistant to different drugs. George Demopoulos and his team are studying ways to make mosquitoes resist infection by the parasite. There are hundreds of kinds of mosquitoes in the world. Most do not spread malaria. Some have immune systems that kill Plasmodium. He says researchers are interested in the immune reactions that are responsible for killing the malaria parasite. The researchers have developed a way to make genetic changes in the 3 mosquito species known to spread malaria. The changes cause their systems to attack the parasite, blocking its development. Other researchers are working on ways to spread these genetically modified insects among mosquito populations. Professor Demopoulos says there is still a long way to go, but current malaria research is highly promising. A new vaccine is in final testing. So far, it has proven effective at preventing the disease in half of those vaccinated, which is more than ever before. And at the Malaria Institute at Macha in Zambia, researchers are developing an easier way to identify malaria. The test uses saliva instead of blood to diagnose the infection. Current efforts in malaria control are mainly based on the use of insecticide sprays and treated bed nets. But George Demopoulos says malaria needs to be attacked with drugs, vaccines, and bed nets, and with whatever researchers can develop. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Technology Report. An organization called the World Future Society publishes a yearly report about how technology, the economy, and society are influencing the world. Tim Mack heads the World Future Society. He says medicine is one area of growth. Mr. Mack says the fields of nanotechnology, biotechnology, and information technology are working together to create new ways to help patients. These include better ways to provide medicine and identify disease without invasive operations. Mr. Mack also says developments in artificial intelligence could lead to a future where disabled patients could be cared for by a voice-activated robot. The World Future Society also publishes the Futurist magazine. Every year, it examines developments in technology and other areas to predict the future. The magazine released the top 10 predictions from the Outlook 2011 report. Several of the predictions dealt with technology. The report said internet search engines will soon include both text and spoken results. It said television broadcasts and other recordings could be gathered using programs developed by the Fraunhofer Institute for Intelligent Analysis. Outlook 2011 also examined refuse collection. It said industrial nations will send much more waste to developing countries. This will cause protests in those countries. In about 15 years, developing countries will stop accepting foreign waste. This will force industrial nations to develop better waste-to-energy programs and recycling technologies. The report also had a prediction about education. It said young people use technologies for socializing as well as working and learning. So they solve problems more as teams instead of competing. In this way, social networking is supporting different kinds of learning outside the classroom. The World Future Society also predicts that robots will be able to carry out mental commands from human beings. Scientists have shown that individuals can type by using their brains without physically touching computer keyboards. In the near future, experts say brain emailing and tweeting will become more common. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can find scripts and audio of our programs at voaspecialenglish.com. We are also on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Technology Report. The world has almost 7 billion people. At least 2 billion are expected to be on the internet by January. New growth is mostly from developing countries. Yet only 21% of their population is online. A group called the World Wide Web Foundation is working to make the web more usable to more of the world. Tim Berners-Lee is the British computer scientist who invented the World Wide Web. He announced the launch of the Web Foundation last November. The group says many people can access the web but are unable to use it. The biggest reason is illiteracy. The latest United Nations report says almost 800 million adults are unable to read or write. Even for those who can read, much of the information that is available on the web is not in a language they can understand. Tim Berners-Lee first proposed the idea for the World Wide Web in 1989. This was 20 years after Americans developed the first version of what we know as the Internet. The Internet is a network of networks. It lets millions of computers communicate with each other. The web is a major part. However, people now often use applications that are not web-based, like on social networks and mobile devices like the iPhone. Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web as a way to help people share information. His early work brought the hypertext markup language, or HTML, used to create web pages. It also gave us the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, the HTTP before web addresses. By 2008, Google reported that the number of web pages had passed 1 trillion. Steve Bratt is chief executive of the World Wide Web Foundation. He says the foundation wants everyone to be able to use this information. He says, "Our main purpose is to advance the web to empower people." Partnerships with the Web Science Trust and the World Wide Web Consortium aim to create applications that make the web more user-friendly. Steve Bratt says mobile technology is an important part of that work as more and more people use their phones to go online. He says, "We have to make the web a lot easier to use, even on the simplest and least expensive mobile phones." For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. International Women's Day is celebrated every year on March 8th. Groups around the world use the day to honor the achievements of women. They also use the day to call attention to some of the major social, political, and economic crises affecting women and girls. Forced marriage, sexual abuse, poverty, and lack of education are among the leading issues. The United Nations says 1 in 5 women worldwide will be the victim of a sexual assault in their lifetime. The agency says rape and domestic violence are a major cause of death and disability among women ages 15 to 44. And it says more than 130 million women around the world have had their external sexual organs damaged or disfigured. This practice is known as female genital mutilation. Poverty, food insecurity, and access to education are also major issues affecting women. The United Nations says the majority of the world's 1.3 billion poor are women, and that women and girls in many countries lack access to education. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says until women and girls are freed from poverty and injustice, the world's goals for peace, security, and sustainable development are at risk. National Women's Day was first celebrated in the United States on February 28, 1909. It became an international celebration in 1911. A year earlier, a women's rights leader suggested the idea at an international conference of working women in Copenhagen. Clara Zetkin said women around the world should set aside one day every year to protest oppression and inequality for women. More than 1 million women and men attended events in Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland during the first International Women's Day in 1911. The date for the observation was changed to March 8th in 1914 in honor of the first organized protest for women's rights. It was on this date in 1908 that 15,000 women marched in New York City to demand better pay, shorter hours, and voting rights. Several countries now celebrate International Women's Day as a public holiday. They include China, Russia, Bulgaria, and Vietnam. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. Transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. And you can find us on Twitter and YouTube at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Microsoft has announced its first tablet computer. The device, called the Surface, is designed to compete directly with the popular iPad. The computer software maker announced its new tablet in June at a media event in Los Angeles. Microsoft will offer two versions of the Surface. Each has a different processor. The Surface for Windows RT runs on an ARM processor. It is less powerful than the Surface for Windows 8 Pro, which uses an Intel processor. The RT is also thinner and weighs less than the Pro. Either tablet weighs no more than about 900 grams. Both have screens that are about 27 centimeters in size. That is a little bigger than the iPad screen. Microsoft has not said exactly when the new Surface will appear in stores, but it is expected to be sometime in September or October. This is about the same time that the company plans to release its new Windows 8 computer operating system. Brenda Estrella owns a laptop computer. She has been considering switching to a tablet. She says for her, the iPad is more of an entertainment device. In her words, if Microsoft is coming out with a tablet that actually you can type and actually do different things other than just swipe, then that would be better. Many technology lovers, including Catherine Clinch, are excited about the new device. She points out that the Surface stands by itself, so you don't have to buy a stand. Also, there is a keyboard that can also act as a cover. Those are all wonderful things, she says. But what interests her most is the potential to get rid of the netbook, to get rid of the laptop, to maybe even down the line get rid of the full computer. Fox Van Allen is a technology expert. He agrees the Surface seems to have more to offer than the iPad. He says it's a device that almost serves as a replacement for a PC. The Surface is meant to compete with the iPad, but not everyone is sure it is a better product. John Ayala says he is glad there is a competitor, but he is sticking with his iPad. For years, Microsoft has made software, not computers. A few earlier attempts by the company to make and sell hardware products failed. That includes the Zune music player. It could not compete against Apple's iPod. Estimates place the value of the tablet computer market at about $79 billion this year. Microsoft hopes to capture a share of that market with its latest device. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Microsoft says it is making progress in efforts to stop the cybercrime operation known as Zeus. In March, federal officials in the United States raided office buildings in 2 states. They seized evidence related to the Zeus family of malicious software. Richard Boscovich is with the Microsoft's Digital Crimes Unit. He says the objective of the raids was to seize evidence which might help identify the individuals behind the Zeus family of malware. The bigger goal is to identify the computers of people all over the world that are compromised. That means they have the malware on their computer, which is being used to victimize others, and they don't even know about it. Cyber criminals use Zeus to create a network of infected computers, or botnet, to steal personal information from computer users. Mr. Boscovich says the operation reaches around the world. He says this malware was present at any given point in time in at least 13 million computers worldwide. Malware means malicious software. It also can be called a computer virus or worm. Mr. Boscovich says the malware is spread through emails, where people are tricked into clicking on a link or visiting a website. And once that happens, the objective is to infect the person's computer with this piece of malware. The malware is programmed to record every keystroke as you type on a computer keyboard. It gathers details about the websites you visit, your usernames and passwords, or other personal information. The information is then sent to the botnet's command center, which is a location on the internet. From there, the criminals will direct all of the infected computers to contact the botnet from time to time to ask for directions. Much of the stolen information is sold on the black market. The information can be used to steal money from bank accounts or make purchases online without the victim's knowledge. Officials say these malware invasions are one of the main causes of identity theft. Microsoft brought a case against the Zeus operation on March 19th. The company released the details of the case after the buildings were raided on March 23rd. Next week, we'll talk more about the raids, Zeus, and what Microsoft says computer users can do to protect themselves. We will also talk about other recent efforts to fight cybercrime. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prisucci.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. More than 20,000 new products appeared at this year's International Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, Nevada. Among the attention getters were Ultrabooks, or very thin laptop computers. Also, Microsoft announced new smartphones with the Windows Phone operating system. Far from the bright lights of Vegas are the poorly lit streets of Delhi. A new mobile app called Fight Back aims to make those streets safer for women like China Sika. She often works late. A company taxi takes her part of the way home, but then she has to walk 5 to 10 minutes alone. It's dark, and the kind of people who are around are not really to be comfortable with or safe, she says. Ms. Sika uses Fight Back to follow her location with GPS, or Global Positioning System software. Jagdish Mitra is the head of Canvas M Technologies, which launched the app. He says, "The moment you feel uncomfortable, you really don't need to do anything else but press one button. The woman has a few seconds to cancel her decision. If not, a message with her location will go by text, email, or Facebook to anyone she has put on a list. The location also appears on a map in the company's offices. But Mr. Mitra says his company does not serve as a public monitoring center. The law has to be managed by the people who actually are authorized to do it, which is the police and so on and so forth." Officials reported more than 400 rapes in Delhi in 2010. Many media organizations have called the city of 17 million people India's rape capital. Kalpana Viswanath is a researcher with the women's group Jagori. She works to make cities safer for women through changes like better lighting and wider sidewalks. She supports Fight Back, but has some concerns. While the app to me is very important and has a good role to play, I think what we have to be careful about is that it doesn't again fall back on women to solve their problem. The makers of Fight Back say police in Delhi and other Indian cities have expressed interest in linking to the system. Hindal Sengupta is a founder of YPOL, a nonprofit group that works on the Fight Back project. He says Indian police often do not take women's safety seriously. He says most women don't go to the police because in most parts of the country, the police are seen as more part of the problem than part of the solution. There's a video about Fight Back at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. A new study looks at privacy in a world where computers can increasingly recognize faces in a crowd or online. Alessandro Acquisti at Carnegie Mellon University's Hines College in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, led the study. Professor Acquisti says social networks like Facebook and LinkedIn represent some of the world's largest databases of identities. He sees increasing threats to privacy in facial recognition software and cloud computing, the ability to store huge amounts of information in data centers. The convergence of all these technologies, face recognition, social networks, cloud computing, and all these advances in data mining are creating this world where you can blend together online and offline data. You can start from an anonymous face and end up with sensitive inferences about that person. Recognition systems measure things like the size and position of a nose, the distance between the eyes, and the shape of cheekbones. The software compares lots of images to try to identify the person. Facial recognition programs are used in police and security operations, but the software is increasingly popular in other uses, including social media sites. For the study, the Carnegie Mellon team used software from Pittsburgh Pattern Recognition, or PitPat. Google bought that company last month. The software can recognize faces in photos and videos. The researchers did 3 experiments. First, they collected profile photos from a dating website. Its users try to protect their privacy by not listing their real name. But comparing their photos to pictures on Facebook identified 1 out of 10 people. In the second experiment, the Carnegie Mellon researchers asked permission to take pictures of students on campus. They compared these to photos on Facebook. This time, they correctly identified 1/3 of the students. In the third experiment, they tried to see how much they could learn about people just from a photo. They found not only names, but birth dates, personal interests, and even locations when people listed them. And Professor Acquisti says face recognizers keep improving. In June, Facebook launched a facial recognition system to help users tag or list the names of people in photos. Germany became the first country to declare this software a violation of privacy. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Humanitarian aid groups have promised to continue their work in Afghanistan after militants murdered 10 medical aid workers August 5th. Officials say the 7 men and 3 women worked for the Christian aid group International Assistance Mission. They were returning to Kabul after a trip to Nuristan province to provide medical care and supplies. Those killed were 6 Americans, 1 German, 1 Briton, and 2 Afghans. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack. It accused the aid workers of being spies and spreading Christianity. Violence against aid workers has increased in recent years, even though international laws are supposed to protect them. 17 aid workers were killed in the first half of this year in Afghanistan. 19 others were kidnapped. In Pakistan, 7 aid workers from the Christian group World Vision were killed during an attack on their office in March. Officials believe militants were responsible for the attack. The Humanitarian Policy Group has been studying violence against aid workers for more than 10 years. The group released its latest report on the issue last year. Abby Stoddard works with the international research group Humanitarian Outcomes. She helped write the policy group report. The report says that in 2008, 260 humanitarian aid workers were killed, kidnapped, or seriously injured in violent attacks. This was the highest number of incidents since the group began doing the research 12 years ago. Mrs. Stoddard says more than 60% of the incidents took place in 3 countries. She said there has been an increase in major attacks against aid workers. But this has been driven by the extremely violent environments in Afghanistan, Somalia, and Sudan, especially the Darfur area of Sudan. Sri Lanka, Chad, Iraq, and Pakistan also had many cases of violence against aid workers. Abby Stoddard says ongoing conflicts in the countries increase the risk of violence against aid workers. Mrs. Stoddard called the recent murders in Afghanistan horrific, but she said they are not uncommon. She says incidents involving nationals instead of foreigners do not get the same level of attention. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. You can comment on this report at our website, voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Carolyn Persutti with the VOA Special English Technology Report. A powerful earthquake struck the northeastern coast of Japan at 2:46 p.m. local time on March 11th. Japan's meteorological agency released its first tsunami warnings just 3 minutes later. The country has one of the best earthquake early warning systems in the world. There are more than 4,000 seismic intensity meters in place throughout Japan to measure earthquake activity. These meters provide information within 2 minutes of an earthquake happening. Information about the strength and the center of the earthquake can be learned within 3 minutes. Kostas Sinalakis is a tsunami expert with the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. He said Japan is one of the most well-prepared countries on Earth in terms of tsunami warning. He said they had a warning. I think what went wrong is that they had not anticipated the size of this event. He said there are 2 reasons for this. Japan has not had any event anywhere near as big as this one in the last 150 years. And scientists had not expected such a large earthquake happening off the coast of Japan. The 9.0 magnitude earthquake was the 4th most powerful earthquake ever recorded worldwide. It was also the worst earthquake ever to hit Japan. The tsunami waves that followed were reported to have reached as high as 13 meters in some areas. Kostas Sinalakis said Japan's concrete seawalls were not built to handle such high waves. He said the concrete seawalls in many places in Japan are about 10 meters. That's about 33 feet. In Sendai, they were about 3 meters. That's about 10 feet. So that shows you that at least in that area, they were not expecting such a sizable wave. A tsunami wave can travel as fast as 800 kilometers per hour. To get to higher ground, people would often have to travel for many kilometers. This can take more time than a fast-traveling tsunami will permit. This is especially true in cases like Japan, where the center of the earthquake struck so close to the coastline. The tsunami waves followed almost immediately. Experts say early warning systems will continue to be limited by these facts until earthquakes and tsunamis can be predicted. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Persutti.